We are recording on Monday, September 11th, 2023 at 2:27 p.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Lawal. And as I told him beforehand, I don't want to butcher his name, so I'll just call him Dr. Lawal. But a good friend of mine brought you to my attention and thought you'd be an interesting guest to talk about human trafficking in I guess the abstract of your paper is talking about how there's not even an agreed upon definition of human trafficking, which I feel like is probably the first hurdle in fighting it. Um, but could you, Dr. Lawal, could you maybe give my audience the introduction that you had just given me, and for everyone listening, if the connection's bad or if the sound isn't on par, I might just re-upload this episode. I'll go in and edit the audio so it's louder because the internet's been spotty for us. So if you can't hear it, if you can't, that's fine. I'll just re-upload it. But Dr. Lawal, could you please introduce yourself and talk about the plight and the uphill battle of fighting human trafficking in Nigeria?
Yes, my name is Olawale Lawal. An associate professor at the Lagos State University, Lagos, Nigeria, where I have academic interventions relating to migration, internally displaced people, refugee, and human trafficking. And by my academic qualification and participation, I got invited to be part of. Um, in Nigeria, we have a Lagos state, a state called Lagos. So I'm part of the committee that deals with anti-human trafficking in our state. Lagos is the commercial capital of Nigeria, and so we have these incidents of human trafficking here and there. So we are dealing with all of that. So that is by way of introduction, so relating to what I do. Yeah, that is it. Yeah.
Could you maybe explain how it is that you aid in the combating of human trafficking in Nigeria?
Oh, well, when you say aid in combating human trafficking in Nigeria, first you have to identify first what you mean by human trafficking. And at some point, to identify what is human trafficking, you need to identify the places where human trafficking would be taking place. So part of the areas that we have concern about will be possibly around our airports, where people travel from Nigeria to outside the country. But because human trafficking is not limited to transit around the airport area, you also have human trafficking hubs. For example, where people pass for irregular migrations. Um, for example, Lagos is a coastal area and it is bordered by some other countries. For example, Benin Republic, Republic of Togo, Ghana, and so many, even the major political crisis area, Niger Republic, where you have the military takeover. All of these places are a transit area for human trafficking. But at the level of the committee that is in Lagos, our intervention, well, some of us really had UNODC training, trying to know how some of these things can be identified wherever you are. We know certain things that we are meant to look for when incident of human trafficking is possibly to be taking place. For example, at the airport, you want to see a situation where um, maybe a group of young ladies are going with a woman. You want to see how the woman is in charge of some of these children. By the time you try to look at their movement psychologically, you see the command control system where somebody is always telling them what to do, how to walk, how to behave, how to interact with people. And sometimes in the documentation, you also see that somebody is also holding all of their documents, because some of the things is that the travel documents will be held by the head of the group. That's one of the things you see. First level of identifying the ring of human traffickers is that somebody will be leading the group that's exiting the country, and that person will be in charge of all their passport, their travel documents, and what have you, which is an indication that, of course, something misnomer is taking place. And sometimes you may even see some of these young children, especially young girls, who will be clustering clutching to one another, discussing in low tone, not free to talk loudly, and they will be asking basically on instructions given to them by maybe before getting to the transit point or at the transit point. So basically, identifying some of these things is a product of how well you've been trained psychologically to identify that. And then number two, in Africa and Nigeria, we operate in a cultural context. You know the relationship between mother and child, between parents and their children. And some of the things you look out for is when somebody is not your guardian, is not your parent, is not related to you by blood, there is always that way to identify that something unusual is going on. So this will be one way, that is at the airport. But at the border areas, for example, we don't go to border areas, as I will need to explain to you. We have our immigration services. The immigration services are saddled with the responsibility to identify movement of people, those who are non-Nigerians who are moving outside Nigeria. They have the responsibility to identify them and actually make reportage, whether to other higher levels of law enforcement authority. What we do at our level is when they are brought to us, if we identify issues of human trafficking, by some of the international provisions, you try to assist the victims of human trafficking rather than punish them. So we have facilities at our department, at our level, to host them, accommodate them, provide their immediate needs, and try to escalate some of the reportage of their being with us so that we can possibly identify their parents and whoever cares to provide for their protection to them. That is what we do.
It seems like in order for something as big as the global human trafficking trade and as big as a market, that there would have to be some level of government complicity. Obviously not everyone. That's a generalization like that is incorrect, but do you believe that there's any government complicity, not necessarily or exclusively in Nigeria, but just generally as a whole, to turn a blind eye?
Human trafficking, possibly, you see, some of the activities are covered. They do them covertly. Nobody comes to announce that I am involved in human trafficking. Yeah, actually, since it is covered, you need some level of professionalism to be able to identify what is going on. At our level, we are interested in both the victim, the cartel, and even some law officers, that some of these things happen under their noses and they claim not to know that these things are going on. But I would like also make some differentiation between what you mean by human trafficking and human smuggling of human beings. Smuggling, when people smuggle human beings, or when you say human trafficking. The United Nations Protocol has given us different definitions of these. And even the United Nations has, there's this UNTOC convention, which stipulates that if you are involved in human trafficking, Of course, the person who is being trafficked is usually seen as somebody that is a victim. So you don't criminalize the act. If you get somebody that has been trafficked, rather than applying legal measures against that person, what you do is to identify the problems, the process that led to the trafficking process, and then you can then settle the person or take the person back to the family. That is for human trafficking. But on the part of human smuggling, there is a deliberate act between the smugglers and the cartel. Between the person that is being smuggled and the cartel, meaning that you willingly wish to be smuggled to other countries or other places. So when you talk about smuggling, it means therefore that some fees would have been paid by the person that is being smuggled to those in charge of the smuggling ring. A lot of procedures, paperwork too would follow. Many things will happen in the process. It is a consent based kind of agreement. In the case of human trafficking, it appears that, and in most of the cases that we have seen, we do not see that consent. You can see deceit, cajoling, all sorts of promises that many of the people we see in the human trafficking level, we discover that most of them did not even have sufficient information relating to what they are going to do. But when it comes to the smuggling part, you know that people know exactly what they are going to do. For example, if you say you are moving from Nigeria, for example, you want to go to maybe somewhere in Europe, and you know that the embassies are there to provide consular services for you to be able to travel, and you refuse to go through all of that. Instead, you employ the services of those who assist in illegal migration, and you go through Agadez in Niger, you go through Tripoli in Libya, and then you find yourself in Lampedusa through crossing the Mediterranean Sea and all of that. Certainly, that will be a process of consent from the smuggled to the smuggler. So whatever happens in that direction, I think even from the conventional point of view, the United Nations actually say quite clearly that measures of criminality can be established. But in the case of human trafficking, you see, the best way to even measure some of these things is who are those involved in human trafficking, or who are those that have been trafficked. You discover that most of them are underage children who may not necessarily take personal decision on their personality and whatever they are going to do. In the case of smuggling, you'll see that those who accept to be smuggled, there are people who actually know the consequences, who willingly want to do some of these things. And trafficking itself, the basis of establishing that somebody is trafficking is taking place is that exploitation is also at the center of all of the transaction. Somebody who's been trafficked will have to be paying some things to their masters or their mistress who sits at the top or at the center of the trafficking ring. So to get the difference between smuggling and trafficking is that one, the trafficking ring, you can identify victims that have been trafficked. In the smuggling angle, there are no victims there. There are people who actually willingly endorsed and consented to their being taken to another country. But in making these two differences, you also want to look at what point do we get to declare that somebody's been trafficked or somebody's been smuggled. You'll discover that virtually in all cases, even those that have been smuggled, we want to claim that they have been trafficked. once you have the application of law and they are seeing penalty, they are seeing possibility of somebody being punished or being penalized. But like I said earlier, the issue of age, the issue of sex, that is gender, we always explain these things further. Even when somebody who is underage, there's no consent that you can say for somebody who's underage and say you have that person's consent before being trafficked. So the law, legality, we actually explain some of these rough edges when we meet. I mean, those in concern meet them in the process of adjudication.
So a clear distinction between smuggling and trafficking. Is there within trafficking, are there any blurred lines between what is trafficking? And if you talk about how there isn't a distinct definition, is the lack of definition you're talking about the difference between smuggling and trafficking, or are there subsets within trafficking?
Um, there's distinction. The distinction, without being academic about it, the distinction is also practical, in the sense that when somebody is being trafficked, one, there is not going to be any consent from that person. There is no consent. Whatever that appears like consent will be somebody that has been cajoled or deceived. Most of the information that will be provided for a trafficked person will be information that are not correct. For example, in terms of employability or whatever it is that that person is going to do. For example, a trafficked person can be told that there is a place somewhere in Europe that you go and do domestic work. Whether you do domestic work or you do any other work, what you should do, what the law allows is that whatever wages you are earning for whatever you are doing, the wages or the salary will come to you directly. You are not giving your wages or salaries to anybody. So whatever, when you get out of your country or you go to anywhere and you are working and the wages or salary that you are getting is coming to you, you cannot establish trafficking at that point. But it is when the issue of exploitation is coming in, namely that you go to a place, you do some work, this amount of money, some certain amount of money will be set aside to be paid for the person who actually sponsor your trip to that place. Then that is the establishment of trafficking. And from the point of view of Africa or Nigeria or a cultural context that we have, we always have some systemic procedure. What is a procedure when somebody's been trafficked? Number one, some parents will have to be to swear to some certain things that a particular person who is going to sponsor the trip will say some certain amount of money will be needed for the trip. And the person who is being trafficked or a shorty at home would say, okay, this is after the journey, this is how much that the person will be bringing back to the sponsor of the trip. And until that is completed, the person who is being trafficked is not free, as a matter of fact. And at the end of the day, what you have is a situation where some things could be confiscated, like the travel document of that person, like for voodoo sometimes is involved in some of these things. You see people who come, sit down, and say the consequences of not living up to agreement will be some fetish and some kind of oath-taking process. And sometimes people believe that some of these things can come to them. And at the end of the day, the fear of repercussion of what has been sworn to would make them want to fulfill their financial obligations to anybody who is trafficking them or Allah is guiding some of this process. And in the case of smuggling, what you see is that the line sometimes may appear blur between trafficking and smuggling, because some of the properties that go into trafficking, some of them are still present in smuggling. For example, smuggling, sometimes you do that willingly. People accept that they want to be taken away for some certain vocation or for some certain assignment. But the issue of smuggling here, we can establish that by saying that the person who is being smuggled accepted to all the terms of the agreement. On the other hand, the person that is being trafficked appears to be unaware of many of the things that accompany some of these agreements. But in the angle of smuggling, people know that the consequences of what they are putting themselves into, maybe because of the harsh economy or because of some other challenges, they want to allow themselves and put themselves into such conditions of control. And at the end of the day, they allow that. But when it comes to generally, what we do is at the end of the day to establish which has taken place, is it smuggling or trafficking? We do that immediately when we say who is the beneficiary of the action. If the beneficiary of the action is a third party who is receiving money for services of what he or she has not directly rendered, then that is trafficking. Okay, whether that may also take part in smuggling anyway, but the fact that somebody that has been smuggled has consented to that, both the smuggler and the person that is being smuggled, they are liable under some of the laws of, especially in Nigeria. And I think also from the point of view of conventional provisions of the United Nations treaty guiding smuggling and trafficking too.
How has it affected your view? Does it make you more nihilistic? Does it make you, when you dive into what you've been studying and working against, what does that do to you over the days and years? Do you start to see the world in more bleak terms? Do you have to extricate yourself? Do you have to remind yourself to find the beauty in life? I mean, I would imagine when you're looking at this stuff all day, every day, it's hard to wake up and enjoy the sunrise.
Um, as a matter of fact, when you see that people, for example, there's a work I did, which I call migration industry in Nigeria. If you have time, you can just look at it. Migration industry in Nigeria. We see that there are so many challenges and danger when people move from one place to the other illegally. But what we see generally is that there are certain factors that are actually pushing them to do many of these things. Whether you talk about smuggling or you are talking about trafficking, you want to interrogate some of the factors that are actually pushing people into some of these issues that we are raising. But you know that for every human situation, there will be some people that will take advantage of that. That is where, for somebody that is being smuggled, for example, he's seeing the smuggler as somebody that is rendering a favor, for example, because the objective or the goal is for him to arrive in the Western capital, in the Western nation. So if he gets there through whatever means and warding off all of the dangers that he's come across, if he gets to wherever he's going safely, he's going to be forever grateful to the person who is involved in the transition. But for traffickers, you'll see that exploitation is always the transactions. But from a personal point of view, you want to ask questions first. Why do people get to this point in the first place? What would be the challenges that would drive you? For example, to go through all the Sahara Desert debacles, and you find yourself in another countries where many of them are actually under stateless situations, stateless in the sense that through the Sahara Desert and before you get to Lampedusa and what have you, or before you even get to Tripoli, you have areas that are not under control of any government. So the point is, the dangers they are real. It is only when you get to Tripoli that you now talk about crossing the Mediterranean. That is another phase of the danger that people actually face. But eventually, people still go through some of these things. So from when you leave the academic balance or the academic environment, you face the reality, especially when you have been involved in maybe sometimes we sometimes go to the airport to see people who have been returned or those who have been sent home by the government of, for example, Libya, and we interact with them, and they say a lot of things, and eventually some of these things will change your perspective as a person. One, it will change your perspective about what is going on in your home country, because in most cases, if these people, if they had a choice, they will not plunge into making such journey that is appearing perilous for them. So at my own level, this is what I see. We want to see situations where we can reverse the situation politically. We want to reverse the situation economically. Where I mean, Thomas, I don't think you can leave the country in your state and say you want to plunge into come into a country to look for greener pasture, and you go through all those trajectories of danger and challenges. It is a symptom of some unbridled issues that are happening at home. That is exactly what is pushing them to do some of these things. So that's the effect you have when you see some of these things practically.
How does something like you said it when you said that there are some areas where there is no government authority? I think it's probably I would imagine it's a silly question, but does human trafficking, does that go up in a war zone in a conflict area where there's even more lawlessness?
No. My reference to statelessness was basically about in the process of movement. For example, if people want to go to Italy, the route is from Kano, Nigeria, to Agadez, Niger, to Sabah in Libya, and they'll get to Tripoli. Then from Tripoli, they'll move to the Mediterranean and cross over to Lampedusa in Italy, and they arrive at anywhere they want to go in Italy or Malta. Now, the issue is that since the fall of the president Gaddafi of Libya, you discover that from 2011 up to this very moment, you see a lot of military, spent military personnel that are scattered around the Sahara Desert. And once there is a way they have to survive. Part of what they use for survival will be to abduct people who are traveling through the desert. Now, they are not under the control of any government. What you see is that once you are abducted, you bail yourself out. You pay to be. I'm sure you must have watched almost about 2 or 3 years ago when the CNN television did a documentary on modern slavery. It was actually happening. You have 2 options. Once you are abducted at that route, one is to what I mean by lawlessness. I mean statelessness in that route. But when you come back to factors driving human trafficking and smuggling and all of that, they are not necessarily about warfare. They are not issues. You have, in most cases, there will be functional government in place. You have government in place. You have people in authority. You have a systemic, well-smooth system in operation. But many of the factors driving trafficking or smuggling, whichever term you want to use, is that there will always be economic challenge, either for the traffic person or smuggled person, or the smuggler or the traffickers. There is one economic challenge that they are facing, and that will ignite delving into the activities of smuggling or trafficking. So establishing the reasons why we have smuggling or trafficking is not entirely about statelessness. It is about economic despondence. It is about economic challenges. It is about people trying to look outside the government it is a recourse to personal help. For example, when people just want to do something to get out of their economic challenges. As a matter of fact, in Nigeria, there is also an organization. It's a national organization that is called NAPTIP, National Agency for Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, National Association for Prohibition of Trafficking Persons. Some of the things that come before that organization is that even sometimes parents give consent and allow their children to be taken away once the monetary part of it can be met. For example, you have people who have been trafficked or smuggled, and you see that there is this remittance that will come with it. Maybe not immediately, maybe 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years down the line. Some of these people, once they are stable wherever they go to, they still provide some economic succor to their families back at home. Some of them sponsor children to school who are not their children. Some of them sponsor family members for education and even provide health care one way or the other. And some of them, they are fortunate enough to even build factories where they become employers of laborers. So the first factor to look at is the drivers of trafficking or smuggling. The drivers are economic, many of them are economic induced challenges, but the government will be there, will be present, and maybe what comes with good governance may be absent. And that is why you see people plunging into some of this. Okay.
So lack of economic opportunity. And that's the quickest way out.
Yeah, you should call them economic migrants.
Yeah. That's dark. I mean, yeah, it's so much easier to just pretend it's all evil. Well, it is, but that puts such a more realistic spin on it when it's just people trying to get out of an awful situation. It's so realistically then, how do you fight it? What is the most effective way to go at it? Do you treat the symptoms of it? Do you jail the people involved, or is it a much more abstract, bigger picture kind of thing where you have to develop the nation so that there's more economic opportunity, which is kind of like a weird connection, but we say we fight human trafficking by getting a loan from the World Bank, and in 20 years maybe there's more jobs. And it's not a very satisfying answer, but it kind of seems like, so you can go to the doctor and something's wrong. It kind of all boils back down to, are you getting enough sleep? Are you exercising? Are you eating healthy? Everything really kind of stems from that. But that's not an answer anybody wants. You want a quick answer. So how do you realistically fight it?
At the level of the committee that I belong to,
Yeah.
we have we, many of the people who are in that committee primarily belong to one agency or the other. Okay, my involvement, for example, is to provide um, like academic backing, conventional law issues that I have learned in the process of my research here and there. We have police officers, the police institution inside that committee. We have members of the NAPTIP, which I mentioned. We have those in charge of orientation of people who give orientation, like explaining the effects of traveling of trafficking to people. So we have so many organizations. We also have those in charge of drug um, um, drug related offenses represented in the same organizations I'm talking about. We also have non-governmental agencies who provide, who have donor agencies who give them infrastructure to be able to accommodate victims of some of these things that we are talking about. So, and we have lawyers. We have lawyers who, when it comes to issue of legality, for example, somebody possibly may not be paying some, may have reneged from the agreements that he or she had entered into with a cartel. And some of these things, it's funny, they become issue of legality. So we have lawyers who state out the provisions in the constitutions and actually ensure the freedom of this person. And we also have people who are in charge of neighborhood watch. Those who they are paramilitary officers, they are not police, they are not military, they are not anything, but they know what goes on around their communities, around the coastal area, for example, in Lagos and all of that. Battling some of these things or to tackling them, it comes with the process of first identification, whether some of these things are taking place at all. Once you identify them, the next stage is reportage. You will report that these things is taking place, and the next is to take appropriate action. If it is something that has legal concern, the lawyers in the committee will take care of the issue of legality or otherwise of what has taken place. And some people that have been rescued or that have been saved from the ring of smugglers or traffickers, some of them, for example, the distance between Lagos and some areas where some of these people actually are coming from originally, maybe almost about 500 kilometers or more. Now we need to house them in a place where they can actually be accommodated temporarily, ending the time where those their original those who their parents or guidance will come and pick them. There are some we cannot even get who claim that they know them or something. Such people we still have within the Lagos state government. People that, I mean, we have ministries that take care of people like that. We can take, if they are not of age, they can go to motherless homes that is under the control of the government. But generally speaking, the issue of prevention has been a major challenge, if you get my point, because preventing some of these issues may actually be the most important goal that any state or government organization intends to achieve. But in most cases, we have failed a little bit in the area of prevention. What we do generally, and as frankly as I want to tell you now, is that some of these crimes or events would have taken place before getting to us. So we at our level provide all of these areas of interventions that I've mentioned. If it's somebody that needs to be saved from legal ring that has surrounded his state, we ask lawyers to find out how to get such a person out. If it's somebody that is has been saved and there is nowhere the person goes, we do some of all the things that we need to do to provide succor for the person. But like I said, in the area of prevention of the crime, of, for example, trafficking, you discover that because of the covert nature of some of these things, you don't get to hear anything until when promises have not been kept, until when you see that you have violations of the person's what human trafficking itself is violation of human rights, so to speak. But you have in an area you don't even know what is going on. Maybe until when somebody is shouting in the neighborhood that something seriously is going on, and people will call attention of the committee or anybody that something is going on in the next building, and you discover that once you get the law enforcement agent to force the place open, you find some of these people there. It is at that point that you begin to do one or two things that you need to do as members of a committee. So prevention, there is a lot of gap to be filled when it comes to prevention. But in terms of intervention, okay, meaning that these things have taken place, but now how do you now intervene in arresting the culprits, in trying to resettle the victims and providing succor to them here and there? So the government have agencies to do all of that, and the things have been done in that direction, but it has never been perfect. But talking generally about, and I'm sure you've said it, that the long-term provision is that, or expectation, is that some of these things we cannot say because the government is not doing this, and that is why we have these incidents, we have these issues. At the end of the day, there must be a stopgap solution, one way or the other. And what many of us have been advocating is that government responsibilities are there for government to take care. Agency responsibility are also what we have to do. Namely that it is not enough for anybody to cite economic despondency as a basis of engaging. It's just like telling somebody saying you are stealing because you do not have, or what have you. It is never so tenable. So anyone who is involved in this, especially for human trafficking, the laws of Lagos, for example, and the laws of Nigeria has been so is so pronounced, and the penalty are well spelled out. And many of those the people that have been caught, they have been sentenced through provisions. Because what has happened is that both the state and the Nigerian nation, they have aligned their constitutions or their legal system to fit into some of the definitions and the legal limitations of, for example, what the United Nations has said about trafficking. And before now, you do not even have enough legal tools to prosecute those who have engaged in this. But now, for example, Lagos is more advanced than all other states in Nigeria, because it used to be the federal capital. Now it is commercial capital of Nigeria. So the advances that have been made in Lagos other states have come for training and for training, and many of them are domesticating some of the things that they see in the Lagos legal system and the Lagos social system in accommodating and intervening in the areas of intervention against for victims of trafficking.
Um, Again, on a personal note, if you don't mind me asking, why did you choose this path? Why did you get into this? I mean, other than it's the right thing to do, why did you what pushed you to get involved in this?
This is if you make conceptual clarification, there is always a borderline when you are dealing with refugee issues. If that is a major concern, for example, my PhD thesis is on refugee law. Okay, by the time you are dealing with a refugee, you find yourself talking about migrants generally. Okay, later that will cascade into you delving into maybe internally displaced people. Okay, and at the end of the day, you still discover that, for example, my invitation to the committee is actually based on some of my um, um, academic interventions here and there. And by the time I got into that committee, my interventions were not limited to academics any longer. I have had to do reportage of incidents that I see happening around me, or when I travel and I see something I consider, because we have government protection and cover or what have you, it is easy for somebody like me to ask somebody whom I see with some children, and I identify some of the factors that I raised earlier. I can ask what are they doing. If I'm not satisfied, and in most cases you won't be satisfied, you get those exactly in charge of enforcement to ask further questions. And in most cases, in some cases, arrest can be made and further investigations will. So I think my exposure to refugee matters, okay, actually would explain my interest in human trafficking issues. When you do refugee studies and you do research, possibly you may have gone to refugee camps and you see challenges that the refugees are facing. That ignites some passion about anything, about people crossing national boundaries to other places. And you want to further investigate. So from refugee, I moved to uh, migrations generally, and that dovetailed or opened the floodgates to seeing people that have been deported or returned as a result of smuggling from Nigeria. So by the time you do cross examination, you are asking them questions. You'll be you'll be open to other areas that are new to you. For example, you'll begin to see that people are forced out of their country as a result of, or they are cajoled or deceived out of their country as a result of some financial gains that will establish trafficking as soon as you come across such situation. But you see, what is at the center of all of this is humanity.
Hmm.
Okay, if you discover that, okay, somebody has been taken away from his or her country without her consent, and the person is working without enjoying the fruit of her labor, and somebody is somewhere collecting, you cannot um, imagine or phantom how much some of these people are paying. I may not know the equivalent in dollars, but some of them pay millions of our local currency to those that that they call cartels and the leaders of some of these things. But the actual money that they will use when it comes to, if it is smuggling, for example, many of them do not even pay anything to this cartel. They just ask them to come and they take them away. It is when they get there, they get trapped. And at the end of the day, and so the ignition, the reason why I got interested in this is my studies first in the refugee issues and migration studies. But it's all encompassing. The human trafficking started coming in one way or the other through my fraternization with organizations in Nigeria.
Hmm.
Yes.
I guess lastly, my last question, and then we can wrap this up is what is the most encouraging thing you've seen? Has there been a general trend towards you guys are getting better at intervening? Has there been more people becoming aware or donating time or money? What's the most encouraging thing you've seen?
What has been most encouraging is that the Nigerian government has is this is a matter of law. It's a matter of law that all states in the federation, we have 36 states, all of them must domesticate or localize anti-human trafficking agencies. Okay, it is a matter of law. You must have that in your state. You cannot give us any excuse not to have. So the first thing that I think positive in that direction is that the awareness, especially from the point of government, that this is a real danger. It is not something that is imaginative. It is something that is there. So that government is getting involved. The government is getting involved to that extent for, making such laws that people must actually do that. That is positive. Then, apart from what governments have done, you also have this National Orientation Agency in Nigeria going to all possible areas where they can communicate with people. They go to marketplaces. They go to religious organizations, mosques, churches, and they explain this the use of, because when you say human trafficking, some of these terms are elitist. We are the one calling them human trafficking. We are the one calling them human smuggling. But if it comes to the local level, people can even come and throw human trafficking to an uninformed person as something that appears to be a favor, and the person will take it hook, line, and sinker without knowing that this a crime is almost about being committed. So that is now part of the things that I see as encouraging. If you ask people today, however illiterate they may appear to you, they would have heard something about human trafficking in 2023. Now, if you take it back to about 10 years or about 7 years ago, for example, the issue of human trafficking gained popularity or momentum almost in about 2004 or 2005 in Nigeria. But it went into coolers. Change of government may also lead to change of interest. But there have been sustained interest in almost about 6, 7 years. Regardless of which are the aims of affairs politically, you have people really understanding that this is an issue that will need to be tackled from in Nigeria. Yes.
Hmm. You're doing God's work, man. It's an honor to have you on here. That was cool. You you know a lot about it.
I'm grateful. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yes, sir. And yeah, I'd love to have you on again sometime and just give you the floor. I feel like that's the least I can do. Um, But yeah, thank you for your time. You are a wealth of information. That was impressive. You know this thing upside down and backwards.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
And thanks for conceiving the idea to get in touch with me. And
Absolutely.
I am, and I'll be willing to, because there are so many areas too that I am only following your question. That there are some areas of concern. Maybe by the time we talk privately, I can open those areas to you that you may be interested in interrogating them for your audience to hear. So we keep in touch.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Lawal, thank you so much for coming on here, man. You're a cool guy. You're doing God's work, and it was an honor to have you on here.
Thank you very much. Can I have recording of this?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I'll send you the link. Yeah.
God bless you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Guys, thank you so much for watching.